because you're so kindly receptive to hearing about our attempts to describe Prabhupada. We'll go on with this. Last night we read about Prabhupada being alone in New York City, in the uptown. Office, which was given to him by the Yoga Society up there. And how he was somehow speaking, and a few people were coming by, and then by Krishna's arrangement, some of the younger people who were mostly located downtown Manhattan, they started coming up there. The Prabhupada was still living in this little tiny office. In April 1966, Srila Prabhupada's room was robbed of his typewriter and tape recorder. On returning to the building one day, the janitor informed him of the break-in. An unknown robber had broken the transom glass above the door to room 307, climbed through, taken everything, and escaped. As he heard the details of the crime, Prabhupada became convinced that it was the janitor himself who had broken in and had stolen his things, and was now staging a fictional account of a thief who had gone through the overhead transom. Knowing there was no way he could prove anything, the Prabhupada simply accepted his loss with disappointment. He described the theft in a letter to India as a loss of more than 1,000 rupees worth of goods. It is understood, he wrote, that such crime as has been committed in my room is very common in New York. This is the way of material nature. The American people have everything in ample, and the worker gets about 100 rupees as daily wages. And still there are thieves for want of character. Low-class men, workers, are 100% drunkards. Their social condition is not very good. It was not very long before acquaintances were offering Srila Prabhupada replacements for his old typewriter and tape recorder. But he had lost his spirit for living in room 307. What would prevent the janitor from stealing again whenever he desired? He began to reconsider the request of young men like Bob Lefkowitz and Harvey Cohen that he relocate downtown, where they said he would find a more interested following of young people. It was at this time that Harvey Cohen offered Srila Prabhupada residence in his art studio located on the Bowery. Cohen was a commercial artist who had been working with a Madison Avenue advertising firm. He had recently received an inheritance and had obtained an artist-in-residence loft in the Bowery to pursue his own career as a painter. While living there, he had been taken advantage of by a group of heroin addict acquaintances who kept coming by, and recently his loft had been robbed. Cohen was now disillusioned with New York and wanted to go to California. Before leaving, he directly offered his Bowery loft to Srila Prabhupada to share with another boy named Paul Murray. Prabhupada considered the offer as timely. Cohen himself advised Prabhupada that his mission would be more successful near the downtown area. Considering the different factors, Srila Prabhupada decided to accept the offer of the Bowery loft as his living place. As he was preparing himself to leave 72nd Street, an acquaintance of Prabhupada's, an electrician who worked in the building, came to warn him against moving to the Bowery. He protested that a gentleman like Prabhupada should never move to the Bowery, which was the most corrupt place in the world. His things had been stolen from room 307, but moving to the Bowery was not the answer. It would be like going from the frying pan into the fire. Speaking with personal concern, the electrician friend tried to insist that Prabhupada was unaware of the danger he was planning to enter, and that he should take his friend's advice. "No, Swamiji, you cannot go there." But by now, Prabhupada had decided to move. He considered that an auspicious offer was being made to him. Now he wanted to go forward, and he did not heed warnings of the Bowery's dangers. As he would say later, I couldn't understand the difference between friends and enemies. Although my friend was shocked to hear that I was moving to the Bowery, I passed through many dangers, but couldn't understand that this was danger. Everywhere I thought, this is my home. Srila Prabhupada's new home, the Bowery, had a long history as part of New York City. In the early 1600s, when Manhattan was known as New Amsterdam and controlled by the Dutch West Indies Company, the ruler of New Amsterdam, Peter Minuet, staked out a north-south road called the Bowery, because a dozen farms, or Boweries, were laid out on either side of the road. Thus it remained a dusty country road with quaint Dutch cottages and peach orchards growing in the nearby estate of Peter Stuyvesant. It became part of the high road to Boston and figured in many a revolutionary incident as the only land entrance to New York City. In the early 1800s, the Bowery was predominated by the German immigrants. In the later 1800s, it became predominantly Jewish, and later became the city's center of theatrical life. A history of Lower Manhattan describes the Bowery as follows. After 1870 came the period of the Bowery's celebrated degeneration. Fake auction rooms, saloons specializing in 5-cent whiskey and knockout drops, sensational dime museums, filthy and rat-ridden stale beer dives, together with Charles M. Hoyt's song, the Bowery, I'll never go there anymore, fixed it forever in the nation's consciousness as a place of unspeakable corruption. The reaction of Srila Prabhupada's electrician friend was not unusual. The Bowery is still known all over the world as Skid Row, a place of alcoholic, ruined, homeless men. Perhaps the uptown electrician had done business in the Bowery and seen its staggering, falling alcoholics, who sometimes sat around passing a bottle, or could even be seen lying in the gutter, unconscious. It was not unusual for a derelict to accost a passerby, sometimes drunkenly bumping into him and asking for money. Prabhupada's new location on Bowery Street was 8 blocks south of Houston Street. At Houston Street, there was a concentration of Bowery derelicts due to the heavy crosstown traffic. When cars stopped for traffic lights, the bums often came up to wipe the car windshields and then asked the driver for a handout. In colder weather, bums could be seen warming themselves from a fire they kept going in a city garbage can. South from Houston, the first blocks housed mostly restaurants, supply stores, and lamp stores. The buildings were 3 and 4 stories, old, narrow, crowded tenements, their fronts covered with heavy fire escapes. Except for taverns and a few luncheonettes, almost every address was a store supply or lamp store. Traffic on the Bowery ran uptown and downtown. Cars were parked on both sides of the street, and the constant traffic passed tightly. During the day, there was always business activity, with workers moving briskly amongst the slower, unemployed derelicts on the street. Many of the store windows were covered with protective iron gates, but behind the gates, varieties of lamps would be lit up to attract the prospective wholesale and retail customers. 94 Bowery, the address of Prabhupada's Loft, was near the northeast corner of Hester Street. The corner itself was occupied by the Half Moon Tavern, a spacious saloon frequented mostly by neighborhood alcoholics and drunkards. On the top of the tavern sat the 4-story Bowery Flophouse Hotel, the Palma House, which had its entrance at 92 Bowery. The hotel entrance was no more than 6 feet from the entrance to 94 Bowery. The neon sign, Palma House, covered by a protective metal cage, hung from the 2nd floor, suspended on large chains. There was no lobby at the entrance, only a desolate-looking hallway covered with dirty white tiles. Next door, 94 Bowery, was a 4-story narrow loft building. It was long ago painted gray, with the usual facade of massive black fire escapes. A well-worn black door, its glass panels reinforced with chicken wire, opened onto the street. On the front of the building, the letters A-I-R, 3rd and 4th floors, indicated that artists in residence were occupying the 3rd and 4th floors. The first floor of the next building north, 96 Bowery, was used for storage. and its front entrance was covered with a rusty, collapsible iron gate. The building adjacent to that, 98 Bowery, was another tavern by the name of Harold's, smaller and dingier than the Half Moon. Thus, the whole block consisted of 2 saloons, a flop house, and 2 loft buildings. In the 1960s, loft living was just beginning in that area of New York City. The city had given permission to artists, painters, musicians, and sculptors who required more space than the average New York apartment to live in spaces which were formerly factories. The 19th century factories had since been abandoned as too small, and here, after making adjustments for bathtubs, showers, stalls, heating, and fireproof doors, an artist could inexpensively use a large space. These were the AIR lofts. Harvey Cohen's loft was on the top floor of 94 Bowery. It was one open space, almost 100 feet long from east to west, and 25 feet wide from north to south. It received a good amount of sunlight on the Bowery street side, and there were also windows at the west end, as well as a skylight in the roof. The ceiling was unfinished, with exposed roof rafters, 12 feet above the floor. A kitchen and shower area was partitioned off in the northwest corner of the loft, leaving the rest of the area open. Harvey had used the loft for painting, and there were still painting racks along the wall. In the front side of the loft, a partial room divider stood about 15 feet from the front Bowery side windows. This divider did not run from wall to wall, but had an opening at both ends, and its height was a few feet short of the ceiling. As I'm reading this, I'm trying to think of Srila Prabhupada's reception of it. It reminds me of when Prabhupada went to London for Janmashtami in September 1977, which was just before his passing away. Tamal Krishna Maharaj gave a talk when Prabhupada was present, recounting briefly all of Prabhupada's activities since he went to the West. And he was telling from his own experience how in 1968, when Prabhupada was in L.A., for a while they had no temple. They were kicked out of some temple on Hollywood Boulevard. So they would just, he was saying, and so Prabhupada he would speak everywhere, anywhere that he could. So Prabhupada was listening to all this, relishing, hearing the description of his activities on behalf of Krishna. And he spoke out at that point. He said, yes, even in garages. And it's a fact that at that time, the devotees that used to approach different people in the suburbs, sometimes who weren't at all interested, but just, or hadn't any previous knowledge of Prabhupada, and asked if they could use their garage for an evening gathering. So they would go into a typical suburban garage with a rolled-up door and everything, and hold an evening's class and kirtan there, and then on another night have some other garage. So, think how Prabhupada spoke up and added that detail when it was that he would speak anywhere. He said, yes, and in garages. So, we think that Prabhupada would relish hearing these details, so long as they're accurate, of exactly what he was going through, at least as we can see it from limited vision. There was this partition which didn't reach the ceiling, sort of almost like a dressing partition in one part of this open space. A kitchen. This divider did not run from wall to wall, but had an opening at both ends, and its height was a few feet short of the ceiling. It was behind this partition that Srila Prabhupada had his personal living area. There was a bed there and a few chairs near the window. Prabhupada had his typewriter there on his trunk, and stacks of his Bhagavatam manuscripts were placed on a small table. He had also strung a clothesline where he dried his dhotis. On the opposite side of this partition was a dais about 10 feet wide and 5 feet deep, which Prabhupada sat on while holding his